the one, the only, Ben Sion Lang. Good morning and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube. Just Daf It. Today we're doing Daf It Gittin, Daf Tet number 9. We're a little ahead of pace, but I have to make up for Shavuos, or at least preempt the double day of Shavuos and Shabbos, where I'm not going to give a share, at least one of those days. Let's start from the bottom. Chedam and Beis. We had a machlokes yesterday between Abaye and Rava. Abaye and Rava had a machlokes. If basically a person writes a shtar shechor, or emancipation document, to his avid, to his slave, and he says that you're freed with all the nachasim. So the Gemara says, all right, Rava says you could divide it. He's free, but he doesn't get the possessions because you need to makayim the shtar. You can't get possessions unless you makayim the shtar. They had a kula for his own emancipation, right? He could say but otherwise you need kiyum shtaros. You need to verify the signatures to get the rest of the possessions. Abaye says everything is together, and he concludes that you get nothing. You're not even emancipated because you can't get the possessions. So Rava clearly holds palgina dibur. You could split the words, right? Even though he said kol nichsi kinuyallah, part of it is the evet, part of it is the rest of his possessions. So he split it. So Amalei Rav Adav Masel Rava. Come on, who do you hold like Rava? Reb Shimon Damar palgina dibur. Desnan akosef kol nechasav laavdo. He writes all his possessions to his evet. He's giving it to his evet. Yatzav ben chorin. His evet is free. Okay, we know that everyone agrees. Shayar karka kolshu. Let's say he said, I'm giving everything to my evet except a little bit of land. Yatzav ben chorin. According, we'll see this is Reb Meir's opinion. He does not go free because we assumed the piece of land was including the evet on the piece of land. Reb Shimon Omer, la'olam hu ben chorin. He's always a ben chorin if you write something like that. Unless you say that I'm not giving, the one thing I'm not giving to my evet is 1 out of 10,000 of it. I mean, if you said a field, so a field is not an evet, so the evet would be free in that case. But if you said even a little bit of my possession, so we assume that the little possession is the evet that he's not giving to him. Amar Rav Yosef, Barman Amar Rav Nachman, I'll be Shakilas Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, even though Rabbi Yossi praised Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon obviously holds of Palgina and Dibura, right? Rabbi Shimon holds that the little possession, right, we split. The little possession, the little, when you say Chutz Misada Plonis, you can split. The Sada he's not Kona, but he is Kona himself. Tanakama Rameir holds, right, because you're not Kona the Sada. Not like I said before, because he's not on the Sada. Because you're not Kona the Sada. You're not Kona anything, even your freedom. And according to Reb Shimon, we can divide it, right? Part of the possession you're not Kona, but your freedom you are Kona. So according to Reb Shimon, it's Palgin Dibur. Rameir holds you're not Palgin Dibur. So the Gemara says, even though Rabbi Yossi praised Reb Shimon, Allah follows Rameir. The Sanya, when this machlokas between Rameir and Reb Shimon is stated in front of Rabbi Yossi, he basically said of Rabbi Shimon, you should kiss him on the lips, someone who answers things that are urgently needed. Rabbi Shimon answered to what Rabbi Meir said. Even though Rabbi Yossi said that Allah does not follow Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon follows Rabbi Meir. So we don't hold this. How could Rava hold Keneged the Psak Allah, Keneged Rabbi Meir, who said we don't say Palgina Dibura? So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman Hachi. The Gemara challenges Rav Nachman himself, who challenged Rava. They really said, Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Minumi, Amar Rav Nachman. I'm sorry, did Rav Nachman even say that Allah is like Rabbi Meir? That we don't say Palgina Dibura? Amar Rav Yosef, Rav Minumi, Amar Rav Nachman. Shchevim Rash, Kosav Kol Nechasav La'avdo. A person is on his deathbed. He's about to die. And he writes a shtar. I'm giving all my possessions to my Eved. He didn't have any family. He gave it to my servant. Ramad v'chazar. Ramad, he got better. Miraculously got better. Chazar v'nechasim. He can take back his possessions. Ve'eno chazar b'Eved. However, his slave becomes free. Chazar v'nechasim. Mat nashchiv merahu. Ve'eno chazar. Mat nashchiv merahu. He can retract giving away his possessions because when you give away possessions as a shchiv mera, right, you had no intention, if you actually lived, to really give it. You only did it because you were about to die. So it's like you made a stipulation and said, if I live, I'm not giving it to him. However, you can't be chozer be'eved, shari yatzalav shem ben chorin. You proclaimed he's free. So once he's free, right? Man ashchivimra wasn't really in reference to the eved. It's in reference to the possessions. So you see, palgina dibura, we split it. The eved goes free, but the possessions go back to the person. So the Gemara says, really, Rav Nachman holds with Palgina Dibura. The reason Rav Nachman said Allah is like Rav Meir earlier is not because of we don't hold with Palgina Dibura. The reason is when you say I say I'm giving all my possessions except for some land to my Eved, so therefore it's ambiguous, right? It's not entirely clear that you're freeing your Eved. And part of what we're going to learn by Gidei Nashim, when you divorce your wife, is it says krisos. Krisos means it's a complete severance. You have to completely sever the wife from yourself, completely, which is not so apparent by other halachas. And we learn Gzera Shava from Gidei Nashim to Shechure Avadim. So, since by a woman it has to be clear, also by an Eved has to be clear, and now it's not clear. It's not because you don't have Palgina Dibura. We hold like Rava, Palgina Dibura. Except in this case, it's a lacking by Shechure Avadim. There's not explicit, and that's why the Eved does not go free. The Mishnah says, "Amevi get Medinas Hayam and Yachal Omar B'Fani Nechtam." You bring a get from Medinas Hayam to Eretz Yisrael, and you can't say B'Fani Nechtam. We'll see in the Gemara what that means. And Yeshalav Eidim, if there are Eidim to verify the signatures, he's kaim b'chol let them verify the signatures. Echad Gidei Nashim Echad Shechure Avadim Shavu L'Molech Al Mevi. The same halacha that applies to Gidei Nashim applies to emancipation documents of an Eved. For example, the Molech Mevi, whether you're bringing it from Dinas Hayam to Eretz Yisrael, or you're bringing it from Eretz Yisraal to Dinas Hayam, both cases you have to say Vayim Nachtam, Vayim Nachtam. This is one of the ways, we'll see, these are 3 or 4 ways that Gidei Nashim and Shechure Avadim are similar. The Gemara says, what is the Reisha in the Mishnah? What does it mean he can't say? If you'll say he's a deaf mute, how could he even bring the get in the first place? We're going to learn in the Mishnah later on. Everyone can bring a get from Dinas Hayam to Eretz Yisrael, except for someone who doesn't have das. A cheresh is lacking fundamental knowledge. No, when he took the get and he was bringing it to Eretz Yisrael, he had no problems. He became a deaf mute after he gave the get. Before he had the chance to say he couldn't say it. And then he became a cheresh, and he was not able to say so then the halacha is, the Mishnah says, go verify the signature somewhere else. In 3 ways, the get of a woman is similar to the emancipation document of an Eved. Shavu, what are they? Shavu the molechol maybe, like it says in the Mishnah, you have to say a kusi apostle. A get is a reference to a shtar, another way of saying a shtar. All documents that have an aid, which is a kusi. Now, a kusi, it's a machlokas whether kusim were actually Jews or not. This is going according to the opinion that kusim did a real conversion. Whoever a kusi is, it comes from the word uncouth. That's really it comes from the word. You can figure out who are the uncouth people among Klal Yisrael these days. Gary Emes, Gary. Gary Arios, Gary Emes. I'm not going to say anymore. Figure it out yourself. But according to the article, it's a reference to certain people when Sancheiriv took 10 tribes into exile to Africa, I guess, and then he had to put some back in Eretz Yisrael at one point, and they were threatened to convert back to Judaism. In the place of the exiled Jews, he put non-Jews. And they were forced to convert to Judaism based on lions over there, apparently. Some people say one opinion says they converted. It was a valid conversion. They're actually Jews. And one says it wasn't a valid conversion. This Gemara is going, it was a valid conversion. Midrabanan, they said that Midrabanan, their signature on our shtar, let's say, of a loan document, it's invalid, Midrabanan. Except for Gidei Nashim Shechure Avadim. The Gemara will explain why by a get and emancipation documents, the Rabbanan did not make this gzeira. V'chol hashtaros ha'olim, top of Tenem Beis, any shtar, any document, ha'olos b'merachos shalom d'chavim, right? Technically, you're allowed to go to a secular court. You live in America, go to a secular court. If it's validated by the secular court, it was written by the secular court, a loan document, a mortgage, something like that. Even though the people who sign it are non-Jews, ksherin, because the dino malchus dino, whatever the non-Jewish government accepts as a rule is binding on Jews also. Except by get isha and shukhrei avadim. The reason these are different is because these things don't apply to Jews. Dinim mamonis, one of the Zayin mitzvahs beinoch is dinim mamonis. But these things, get and shukhrei avadim, which is learned gzera shava from getting gitei nashem, kedushin does not apply, and get does not apply to non-Jews. They can be married midoraisa non-Jews, but kedushin and gerushin does not apply to non-Jews. There's a fourth similarity between Gitei Nashim and Shechrei Avadim. Omer ten get zel ishti. He says, "Give this get to my wife." V'shtar Shechrei zel avdi, or he says to an agent, an emissary, "Give this get Shechrei." I'm not able to go. Give this get Shechrei. Give this get Shechrei to my Eved. He doesn't want to go himself. If he wants to go ahead, before it gets to him, he can retract. He can tell someone, I retracted. I don't want to give this get. I don't give this shikra. Divrei Meir. Meir says, you can do this. Because according to Reb Meir, in both of these cases, by a woman and by an Eved, it's considered chavin la'adam. It's considered a chov. Women don't want to be divorced. Avadim don't want to be freed. So therefore, it's not immediately, when you give it to the agent, the kinyan does not happen right away. It's not called zachin, according to Reb Meir. Reb Meir, the Rabbanan argue, the Rabbanan say that by avadim at least it's a schus. A woman, it's a chol for her, and then you can retract. But at least by shechrei avadim, it's a schus and you can't retract once you send the agent. So according to Rabbanan, they say 3 ways. Why only 3? To exclude Reb Meir's similarity. Elder Meir minyan lamute. Why say 4 ways? 4 to exclude 5. What is the one that he's excluding? Lamute. Now we would have thought a 5th one. The sign Adam shein yodim lachsom. Adam that don't know how to sign. They don't know handwriting. They don't know Hebrew, or they don't know how to sign their own names. They're illiterate. Makarin lahem niyar chalak. We etch out in the parchment the letters, their names. They fill their names with ink. Amar Shimon says medvar amurim b'gitei nashim. That's only when it comes to gittim of women. Shmuel argues on the Tanakama, and he says it only applies by a get of a woman. They have to actually know not only to read what's written in the emancipation document, but also to sign. So the Gemara first asks, Kriya Mandachar Shmei, or Shmuel talks about reading it. Tanakh wasn't not reading at all. So the Gemara says, actually, the Brisa was missing part of it. According to Tanakama, if they don't know how to read, we read it for them. And we let them sign by etching out the letters. They fill in the ink. If people don't know how to sign, we etch it out for them. And Shmuel argues on both of them. He says, in order to be a valid get, it has to be, and a valid shtar shikhr, it has to be, they have to know how to read it, and they have to know how to sign their names. The point is that this is one of the ways, according to Shmuel, we paskin like that. There's a difference between Gitei Nashim and Shechrei Avadim. A get, you could do it, and Shechrei Avadim, they have to know how to read and to write. There's no other similarities. He says to an emissary, give this get to my wife. Give this emancipation document to my Eved. Umeis, and he dies. Lo yitnu la'achar misa. He died before it got to the hands of the woman, or got the hands of the Eved. You don't give it, it's not valid. Even if you gave it to the woman or the Eved, you're died, so it doesn't work. The shekher doesn't work. Meaning the Avadim pass on to your children, they inherit the Avadim. And the woman, it doesn't work, meaning it's not considered a get. Obviously, a woman whose husband died, she's free to remarry, but it's talking about a case where she was married to a man and he has a brother and they had no children, so it's not a get, and therefore she falls to Yibam. Tnumana leploni umes. However, if a person says, here, take this money to an agent, take this $100, $200, and give it to this person, umes, and he dies before the person got it, yedu lachar misa. We don't say the money goes to the inheritors of the person who sent it. It goes to the person, right? So that's a similarity we find by Gittin and Shechrei Avadim. The Gemara says, Gisani milsa delese b'shtaros. Milse, the isei b'shtaros lokasan. We only talked about things that don't apply to other formal documents. But if it does apply to formal documents, we don't say that's a similarity. The shalach ravim mishmei de rabiva. How do you know this? Ravin sent the name of Yavav. How about Yodin? Shalach Raza Lagola, Meshur Rabbeinu, Shchim Rosh Amar, Kisu Vitnu, a Shchim, a person who's on his deathbed, he's about to die. And he says, write a star. He doesn't have the ability to write his own star. Write a star, Vitnu Mana LaPloni, and give $100 to Ploni, Mace, and he dies. And Kos Vivinosnan. We don't, after he dies, we don't write the star and give. Shemar Lo Gamar Laknoso. Elibishtar, because perhaps he only wanted to write it, he didn't want to give it to him without a loan document. He wanted the loan document written. Vein Shtar Lachar Misa. And the star, the loan document, doesn't apply Achar Misa. You can't, right? You can't write a star after the person died. So you see, even by Dinei Mamonis, this is true also. Just like by Gittin and Shkrei Abadim, it also applies by the star. The case before, where a person says give money, he wasn't writing the star. But here, this is a star. When he writes in the star doesn't apply after Misa. Whereas Va'ika Lishma, there's other similarities between Gittin Hashem and Shkrei Abadim. Right? Both have to be in Lishma. It says La by Gittin Hashem. We don't Gzera Shava. The Shkrei Abadim has to be written for a specific event. Bishlam la Rabba, Hainu Malach Omevi. According to Rabba, who says the whole reason, right, you say B'fari Neta, B'fari Nechem, is to make sure that it was done Lishma. So that is included in the similarity we said before. Malach Omevi, you have to say B'fari Neta, B'fari Nechem. Oh, the Rabba, gosh, according to Rabba, who says it's for a different reason. It's a Kash of a Su. Another similarity, Ben the Rabba, Ben the Rabba, Hayika Mechuber. Both a get of a woman and a shikhr of an eved cannot be, the Gemara later on will learn, cannot be written on something that is attached to the ground, and then you cut it afterwards. Gasani, the Gemara answers, Gasani Psula Derabanan. The similarities are talking about things that are puzzle and make a get or a shikhr eved, emancipation of an eved, Derabanan. Daraisa lo Gasani. These things are Daraisas. Lishma is a din Daraisa. Mechuber is din Daraisa. That it wasn't mentioning. The Gemara is v'hayar ko shelo de kochavim psula Daraisa. Right, the fact that a court, right, makes documents, a non-Jewish court makes documents. They sign their documents with non-Jews. It's binding, except by Gittin, Nashim and Shkrei Avadim. That's Doraisa. Right? There's no get and kiddushin by a non-Jew. Because the Gemara answers Be'edei Mesira Akulezer. That case of Akoshal Akum is where they wrote the star and they signed it in a non-Jewish court, but then Jewish people gave the get to the woman. Well, Kurlezer, the Amar Eidim Masira Karsti, a famous welcome in Ramelazar and Rameh. Ramelazar, we pass it. Ramelazar says that what is integral midaraisa by a get is the people, the Eidim that give it over, not the Eidim that sign the get document. It's the people that give it over. So midaraisa, it's a kosher get. Midarabanan, they passed it because it was written by a non-Jewish court, so it's only a psula derabanan. That's why it's mentioned. We'll leave off the discussion here. The Gemara continues this discussion. Gemara has a question on this answer. Stay tuned for Ian with Ben Sion, where I talk about an important concept in get lachar misa. It comes up over here that you can't give a get after you died. You send a get with an agent to give to a woman, and then you die before it gets to her, so it's not a valid get. Similarly, it's not a valid emancipation document for an eved, as opposed to money. If I give $1,000 to an agent, and then I send it with him, go give it to Shimon, and before Shimon gets it, the person who gave the money died, you give it to him. It doesn't go to the Yorshin of Reuven who sent it to Shimon. Reuven doesn't go to his inheritors. It goes after he died to Shimon. Because money can transfer Rishos after Misa. What is the Svara, the idea behind Gelach Misa? There's two different opinions, two different Rashis. One in Ksuvos, and here in Masechus Gittin he says something different. Tosfos has a problem with Rashi. We'll discuss that. Ian with Ben Sion coming up next.